Well, as of today, we are going to learn a thing or two about the 30s poets, that is, the so called Auden group. But this isn't just about the 30s poets, simply because if we have to learn about the 30s poets or the poetry in the 1930s and the 1930s and 40s especially, we have to know a bit about the historical background, that is, what exactly was that period in history. It's simply because the poets of the 1930 were very much indebted for their writings, for their poetry and their other writings towards the history of that very same age. So, in order to understand the 1930s, the first thing that we have to do is to remember that the decade of the 30s, it was one hell of a period when it comes to studying history, because the 1930s saw a number of things which simply paved the way for the even larger historical upheavals. Upheaval meaning historical, very important historical incidents of the 1940s, because 1939 to 1945 was the time period for the Second World War. So the kind of tensions and tussles and historical underpinnings which actually brought about the Second World War from 1939 to 1945, they were actually present in the era of the 1930s. So in order to understand the poetry, especially the British poetry of 1930, we must understand the time period of the 1930s first. In 1929, the American stock market crashed. It is known as the Wall Street crash of 1929, and it was also the time for the Great Depression. In order to learn more about this, you can always go to the Wikipedia, which I have in front of me right now, and it's written here like this. The decade, that is the 1930s, was defined by global economic and political crisis that culminated in the Second World War. It saw the international financial system collapse, beginning with the Wall Street crash of 1929 and an economic downfall known as the Great Depression. Well, it simply upset the commerce and agriculture and trade in the United States, and the effects were felt all over the world. And remember, First World War has just not just ended, but there is the aftertaste, the very bitter aftertaste. অর্থাৎ পৃথিবীর মুখের থেকে এখনও প্রথম বিশ্বযুদ্ধের যে তেতো স্বাদ সেটা যায়নি। আর আমেরিকাতে স্টক মার্কেট ক্র্যাশ করা এবং গ্রেট ডিপ্রেশন, যার ফলে লক্ষ লক্ষ মানুষ চাকরি বাকরি না খুঁজে পেয়ে ট্রেনের কামরায় এবং ট্রেনের ছাদে গাদাগাদি হয়ে প্রভিন্সিয়াল টাউনস থেকে আমেরিকান বড় সিটিগুলোতে আসতে আরম্ভ করলো শুধুমাত্র খাবার দাবার এবং কাজের খোঁজে। দিস হ্যাড আ ভেরি বিগ এফেক্ট অন দ্য ওয়ার্ল্ড ইকোনমি। It was it's in 1933 that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party comes into full-fledged power in Germany. And it must also be remembered that this was the decade of the Spanish Civil War, in which, in the Spanish Civil War, there was a brigade, a company, not just a company, but a huge collection of soldiers who were known as the Artists and Poets Brigade. So a bit about the Spanish Civil War, that is, Spanish Civil War was the civil war in Spain between Francis Franco, the right-wing would-be dictator, and the Soviet Union and other communism-backed forces who were actually in for socialism. It was something like this from Wikipedia once again. Germany and Italy back anti-communist Falanga or Falange, I don't know the exact pronunciation, forces of Francisco Franco. The Soviet Union and international communist parties back the left-wing Republican faction in the war. That is, there's the right wing and a left wing. The right wing is backed by the Nazi states, Italy and Germany, and the left wing is backed by communist parties and the Soviet Union. Thing is, the left wing brigade, that is the anti-party of Francis Franco, who was a right-wing Nazi fascist kind of person, they lost the war. So Spain went on to become a fascist country from a republic. This must have given into some, sort of disillusionments, etc. And it was bound to be like that. So, the thing is, পৃথিবী তখন একটা বিশেষ যুগ সন্ধিক্ষণের মধ্যে দিয়ে যাচ্ছিল. The world was in political, economic and historical turmoil at the onset of the 1930s decade. So it was not a very simple kind of age. And whenever we are studying the 1930s, we must remember that this background must be kept in mind while studying the 1930s, because the 1930 was an age of huge political, historical and financial upheavals and downfalls.